Hello and welcome to the Scoutcast. My name is Joe.
My name is Seb.
Seb, what is coming up on the show?
It's over. It's done. We never have to do it ever again until next year. Game week 38 has happened, and we've all had great success or great failure, or more likely somewhere in the middle. So we are going to take a little moment to reflect on our seasons, talk about lessons learned, what we can do better, what maybe we did well, and keep doing. Hopefully, for successful seasons next time around. We will also go and have a look at the community's thoughts. Celebrate some of their success, hopefully, a bit of a rough and the smooth, I believe, Joe. But first, a look at that final game week 38.
Yes, we'll have a look at our teams. Just want to say hello to some of the people in the chat as well. Hello, Mario. 98,000 in the world, and for his second season, pretty good. And Soam got first season of playing FPL and got an 82k rank. Well done, very good. Let's see how we got on. So here's me, my final game week 38 score. I got 57, so I was pretty pleased with that. I took Shaw out for Robertson. This is the second season in a row I've got Robertson in for the final day, and the second season in a row that he's done me proud. He didn't score like he did last season, but I'll take it. 8 points. I fielded a whole 11. The other option was to remove Fernandez for Mane, which would have got me obviously a few more points there. But luckily Salah got an assist, and even though Dallas lost a clean sheet, I had a flurry of assists. Son and Harrison and Kane got another assist as well. So I ended up with Pickford, Robertson, Phillips, Nat Phillips, who got me a goal previous week, Dallas, Salah, my captain, Lingard, Son, Harrison, Wood, Kane, Antonio, and on my bench, absolutely nothing. Oh, Joe Ward got me 1 point, so I planned that well. This is what I was aiming for, bizarrely. So I was 93k, 92k, and I wanted to retain because I've never finished outside the top 100k. So my mission was to do that and also stay within the Elite 64, which is the league that FPL General has set up for various veteran managers.
Just showing off now, Jay.
And so I really wanted to stay there. Well, I was something like 47th, and only the top 50 out of the 64 stay in it. So I was always like 3 places. I think I had Az and a couple of others behind me, and so it was perilous. But I knew by doing the Robertson move, it was fitting for me, because I was fairly certain that doing that, being able to field Lingard, who ended up blanking, but I was happy with the 11 I was going to go in with this with. I was happy they were going to play. I was happy I was going to get something from them, and I did. I got returns from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 out of my 11. So I can't complain about that.
That's pretty solid. I mean, you probably achieved what I wanted to achieve, which was a steady enough and solid finish to secure the position you wanted.
Yeah, and I said on Twitter just now that this was the season I'm proudest of. Okay, which I mean, so I put my career history up, and so I've had a few top 10k finishes, and I've finished in the top 1k and top 5k a few times. So looking at that career history over the 13 years, this has been my second worst, but still, 93k. But the one I'm most proud of, because before Christmas I was 4 million. I eventually got, even by game week 17, I was still outside the top 1 million. And I've never been below 4 million. I've never been to that sort of depths before. And it's a different game to play catch up. And you've got to do different things, and it sort of takes me out of my comfort zone. So I've had to do that, and we'll talk about some of the lessons learned this season that I'll take into next season. But one of those was being sensible, sticking with the template, but also taking risks with certain players. And this takes me back to a Meet the Manager video I did with Tom Freeman, and he always has, I think it was his fourth midfielder, is always a risk. He has a fairly, sensible template team, but his fourth midfielder is always someone, teapots, just completely mad, and they're the one you're banking on. So I tend to do that with a third striker, and that's where the likes of, say, Chris Wood came in. and happened to time him for his rare 20-point return. But I'm really proud of this season, for going for 4 million into the top 100k. And I really didn't think it was going to be possible by about game week 33 or 4. I didn't think I was going to achieve it. So I think that's a lesson for everyone, really. No matter where you come in the rankings, set yourself some kind of target. Even if it's top million, top 500k, winning your mini league, getting in the top 5 of your mini league. Just set that sort of realistic target and then go for it. Don't worry about getting, winning it unless, only one person can win it. I was quite pleased with that. So that's why I'm most proud of that.
It's nice as well. You set that target for yourself and you achieved it. That must be very satisfying.
And the season before, just before we move on to your team, the season before was actually the one I'm least proud of, because the season before I got I got 93,000, almost the same rank. It's a completely different season. I started like a rocket. I stayed in the top 100k, 50k for pretty much the whole season. Barely ever removed from it. I was doing really well. I should have kicked on and on and on. And I didn't. I just hovered, went up 10k, down 10k, up 10. And by the end, I just ended up with 93k. And it was a very frustrating season. And my plan for the season was derailed by COVID, like many people. So I wildcarded for all the lovely blanks and doubles that were planned and coming up. And then COVID happened and there was no football for 3 months. And everyone came back with a wildcard that I'd already used. So it was a frustrating season. But this season I thought was, hard we'll come to it later, but, hard at first. But by the end I was quite happy with that. A bit weird. So let's move on to your team. So
so you should be, mate.
But quite similar. Similar game week 38 and a fairly similar-ish final rank as well. So you got was it 49? Was it
49? Yeah,
49. So do you want to go through your team and sort of what your decisions were?
Sure. Mendy with 1 point in goal, which was my transfer. I did Lloris to Mendy. I'll come back to that in a moment. Alexander-Arnold at the back with 5 points, Luke Ayling with 2, and Ricardo Pereira with 0. He was subbed in and then lost his sub point by conceding some goals. Salah captain with 12, Diego Jota with 1, obviously off the bench for Liverpool. Son with 5, Rafinha vice captain with 5 as well, Bamford with 6 off the bench, Antonio 2, and Kane 10. And then my bench is Forster, Gundogan, Shaw, and Luka Dean. Of which I think only 1 played and also got 0 points. So for you, Joe, a perfect bench, right? 0 points across the board.
I love it. I saw that bench and I thought, there it is. It was pretty good, really. I guess Mendy, that was frustrating.
Joe, so I have a confession. The Scoutcast this year has got worse by exactly 1 point. Has beat me by 1 point.
Ooh.
And Lloris, I believe, did he get 2 points on the final day? And so Mendy got 1. So my transfer cost me, not that anyone cares, because I finished 137k and Az finished, presumably about also 130k. Yeah. So it was, I don't even think Az knew he was in that race. It was just me trying to catch him. But yeah, I managed to transfer myself out of that small amount of glory.
Well, I know, very frustrating. We did say, I actually thought, I thought that Chelsea would need to score a lot. They couldn't, obviously, as it transpired, there's no way they could go into that with a 1-0 game plan. It's just not going to happen with Villa, especially with the home fans there. But at the same time, I thought it was possible. I thought Mendy was a better bet than Lloris.
So the thinking was kind of, I had obviously a transfer to use and a few things. So Gundogan, who we presumed wouldn't play, Luke Shaw every chance. Obviously Pereira and Dean, both with poor fixtures or poor chance of playing. Jota obviously came off the bench, but not a good chance either. So there's a lot of things I could have done, all of which would have gone better. Honestly, I think, because when did we last speak? We spoke, was it last Thursday? Something like that. I just left it for 2 days. I was like, I don't want to think about this for 2 days. It will ruin my weekend. So I just left it until Sunday, until about half an hour before. Just looked at my team and went, I can just move Lloris, who I don't think he's getting a clean sheet, to Mendy, who I think has a better chance of a clean sheet. And I did think Chelsea would go for the 1-0 win. And I think they probably did until the plan went wrong, which I guess is what you're saying, right? You didn't think that would be a plausible plan. So I just made that very simple transfer, not exciting by any means. clearly I should have done something with those midfielders. There's Joe Willock, who mentioned a couple of weeks ago and never got it in myself. He would have secured me a healthy 22 points or something over the last couple, and a few other options as well. But I don't really hate it. Like, I made the decision to just leave it, see what happened on the last day, make a pretty simple transfer. I wasn't going to go and finish in 10k or anything like that. So I was pretty happy just to chill out about it.
And well, another difference this season, why I prefer it to last season, the final day, because they've moved the deadline, so there weren't all these annoying leaks everywhere. And I actually would have been priced out of my Shaw to Robertson move, so I did that on a Saturday. And just left it because the more you, as you said, the more you sort of think about it. I didn't want to think about it too much. I think, I might do something, or I might get rumours about something else, and I just wanted to leave it, and what will be with those. And I don't think there were any mad rumours that were unfounded or anything like that. I think there were a few surprises like Bamford. What a legend though! He's benched.
Came on scored,
and then gets 6 points.
Yeah.
So pretty good. We got a few rough with the smooths. But before we do that, I just want to put your career up as well. So
go for it.
Put my one up as well. So we can see here. So you've gone from 389th to 137,000. So
the very short answer to what lessons have we learned is do nothing I did this year and do everything I did last year.
Yeah. So that's the thing. We'll probably come to this, won't we? But is there one key thing that you did in 2019-20 that you didn't do in 2021?
I mean, there's like you say, we'll come to it. There's a few things, but I really think a lot of people are going to have this conversation now, right? Over the next week, 2 weeks of like, what lessons can we learn? People will write articles, people will talk about it on Twitter, people will do podcasts. And there's some great education out there for what we can learn. But I also think there's a massive trap, which me and you are going to fall into on this podcast. And that's saying, I did this thing and therefore I shouldn't do this thing next time. Yeah. It's not that simple. You'll see people going, I took too many risks, I should be safer. Or I was too safe and I therefore should take more risks. Well, both those statements probably can't be true unless they're coming from extremes and meeting in the middle. Realistically, each season is its own beast. And the biggest mistake you can make is going, right, okay, I'm going to set this rule for myself and do this thing next year because reasons. And then next year a pandemic hits, or a pandemic doesn't hit, or Manchester City implode, or Liverpool lose their star centre-back. The key is to be flexible. The best fantasy managers out there aren't the ones that have sets of rules. They're the ones that adapt to situations. That's the only way to be consistently good.
Before we came on air, that's what I was sort of trying to say, because I was saying about, I have a rule, I didn't play to my rules. But that is my rule. Construct your team so it's as flexible as possible, because you don't know what's going to come. And that's why there are certain flexibilities that you can give yourself. And that one of those is get the most expensive player in each position as long as it's credible. 1 year, I remember Robin Van Persie was 14 million at Manchester United, and I went, nope, you're out, not interested, because he had that one good season there, and then his next season was that. And if it's realistic, then do that, because then you can always move down. And but there were other expensive options.
I mean, we'll come on to obviously a bit of that as well in later, but we were talking about how it's interesting how in game week 1 we're often all relatively cautious, when realistically that's probably the time to be most adventurous. And that's personal. Adventurism is personal to you, whatever that means. But if there's ever a time to take a 12-point hit, it's game week 2, when you have the entire season to make it up. I know. No data, positions might be changing, new transfers are coming in. That's the time to really shake things up. And actually, we saw the opposite. We see people towards the end of the season start going, I'll just do random things.
People taking
you
hits.
Have the minimum amount of time for it to come off then.
Game week 38, they were taking a hit. And I was thinking, well, okay, you might make that back. But, I mean, I took an 8-point hit 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago. I made it up that week. And so everything else was clear profit from those moves. But you can't do that in game week 38. It was just, and I did see that a lot. And, I considered it sometimes. And I think I might have, the moves I was considering may have only just broken even. And obviously sometimes, like Robertson, for example, was not a player that like everyone's going, ooh, get Robertson in. But sometimes these little 8 points here and there, that's what you want.
I mean, we've got some really good examples in the chat at the moment of just, people talking about maybe their rules or things they can learn. All of those are super valid. But again, I think, just to hark back to what I said a moment ago, the thing there is not to go, so for example, the one here is a good bench. well, what about if next year we have no cancelled fixtures, there's not many rotation surprises, no huge injuries or anything, then bench is wasting your money. I think for me, the lesson there isn't to have a good bench, it's to be prepared to have the appropriate bench for the season. So it's not about setting a rule that you hold too fast. It's about learning how to analyze the situation and thus respond. And have like this backlog of like, if you like, in this situation, I roll out this strategy. That's all good. But don't decide on the strategy before you're aware of what the situation is. If we were going into war, we wouldn't just go, well, we always use a phalanx or whatever. So we'll do that. So what happens if you're on mountainous terrain? You need to change
It's about being flexible. So if you have on your bench, if your bench is a 4.5 midfielder, say Basuma, 2, Ferguson and Mitchell, the 4 million guys at Palace, and Steele at Villa, 4 million. So you've got ultra cheap. You don't plan to use your bench. But there doesn't give you the flex. That could work out. That could be brilliant. That could be the strategy. You could pile the money into your 11 and fine. But I think it pays to be more flexible and so have a bit more money on the bench so that you can just move down to a Ferguson or a Mitchell if you want, or a Steele at Villa, or those kinds of things.
And don't get me wrong, me obviously saying all your rules are terrible, you should have no rules, is super unhelpful. So that's not what I'm saying. Yeah. It's about employing a strategy. And I mean, I'd like to have a quick word on a couple of ranks that I think are interesting. Yeah. But just another one in the chat, which I really like. I'll stop calling these out. But like Timo Werner, for example, people saying, that was too adventurous. I shouldn't have gone for Timo Werner, an unknown player. Well, what if you'd had that strategy with Mo Salah a few years ago, who came in and scored 30 goals or whatever it was? My point is that neither of those are correct. It let you down with Timo Werner. It would have done you really well with Salah. It's not about having that rule. It's about adapting it when you get the information presented to you. So, the mistake might have been holding on to Werner, not picking him in the first place.
And if he bangs in game week 1, get him in. And if you've got a flexible setup, you can do that within.
And I know that's one of your things, isn't it? Yeah. Flexible setup.
And you can move on to it. And we all want. I started with Werner. We'll come to our game week 1 side shortly, but I started with Werner, and in the end, across the season, he actually wasn't too bad, but he was overpriced. But I expected him to be a Michu or a Salah, and he wasn't.
Yeah.
But if he was, and I didn't own him, I'd want to better get him in.
I mean, I'd love to talk about targets for next season. I mean, I know it's a bit early. Sorry, people. But targets for next season, Timo Werner would be up there for me. But just before we move on, I just wanted to talk about a few of the ranks there.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like everyone, I have the same story of I wasn't paying it. What was it? 2007 there when I first started? I was 17. I wasn't paying attention. Terrible, whatever. I'm not going to tell you that story. I did how I did, and that's the way it goes.
Hang on, did you do better when you were 17 than you did this season?
137,000 is base. I mean, I've got a 420 and a 356 when I was at uni and not playing.
124,000.
137,000 is my worst for a decade. But that is the worst I've done in 10 years.
But your first season, 124,000 is not bad for a first season.
Although there was probably 125,000 managers.
Yeah, there was only 4 people.
But I mean, so obviously, everyone has that thing where I was at uni when I finished 400,000. I was drunk half the time. That is both true and also tough because we all have that story. Therefore, we're all about even. The things that are interesting to me, though, is so a couple of years ago in 2018-19, I think was 14,000 finished. I was 200th at Christmas that year.
Whoa.
And
so that's a frustrating season.
I didn't use my triple captainship at all season. I forgot to use it on the last day. The reason for that, I mean, I don't mean it's a bad thing, not a good thing. The reason for that is, I think I've said it a few times, but until very recently, I was always about mini leagues. I'm in a few of them, the family one for years and years, and that's what got me into FPL. Obviously, there's some decent overall rank finishes in there, and don't get me wrong, when you're high in the ranks, of course you pay attention. I'm not going to pretend I'm not, so humble that I don't pay attention. That's nonsense. But for me, the thing has been winning the mini leagues. Now, I haven't won my mini leagues this year either. It's just been bad everywhere. Work, friends, the family one. Oh, I did win the family one actually, but different story. But what got me into FPL was the family mini league. And for those first few years, first 4 or 5 or whatever, my dad won every single season. So the thing that drove me was not overall rank, was not overall strategy, it was beating my dad. And so that meant doing those things like, having different players to him, or if he had a strong midfield, if I was too far back, go for attack or whatever. I finally flipped that and hadn't lost to my dad I don't think I've lost to him since actually, so about 12 years. My brother's in that league as well. And my brother is one of those that does amazing and then forgets about it for the second half of the season. He's probably a better fantasy manager than me. He just forgets to do it. But he has only won it once in about a decade, and that was that 14,000 season. I was 200th. He overtook me. I took my eye off the ball, and then that led to the last week of the season not using triple captain because I think he finished about 5,000th. I was so many points behind him that I was like, oh, well, it's just fantasy now. It doesn't matter, whatever. The final week, I'll set it up. Forgot to use my triple captain. So, this story is not to go, oh, I went from 200 to 14,000. It's more about the approach to it. And everyone will have those stories. And I think that's almost more informative than what our overall rank is, because there'll be a winner out there, someone who's won FPL, who has never finished inside, I don't know, the top 500,000 before or after. We can all be lucky, or we can all, in inverted commas, take it seriously one year. I don't think it's about that. I think it's about what our goals are, overall rank, mini leagues, whatever, learning from it, having fun, deploying strategies. That's the interesting bit to me.
Yeah, definitely. And also there are certain instances in the season that can just derail it. So I spoke about me using an early wild card, and it was a perfect plan, I thought. But I couldn't have predicted a pandemic. And the season before, I think, or it could have been that season. It was the one where people either captain Mane, triple captain Mane or Salah. Mane got injured after about a minute. Salah went on to have a massive haul.
And I was on the good side.
I was on the bad side of that.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of thing. It's like getting penalty decision doesn't. It sort of derails you. It doesn't knock your confidence as such, but it sort of derails your plans and derails what you're hoping to achieve.
Right. I mean, there's so much luck in FPL, and I would say the skill is consistency. Skill is not winning it. Skill is, well, dare I say, you, Joe, never finishing outside the top 100k. That is consistent and skillful. You have to have some skill to do that, or you're the luckiest person in FPL. Maybe that's true, but I don't believe it. And then I think the strategy we employ is kind of a modifier on that. So to use, I don't know, who's like Super Maverick? Granville back in the day, maybe Late Riser now.
Late Riser.
I'm sure Late Riser won't mind me saying he's had probably his worst season in a very long time. Part of that is because his strategy is, if his mean finish is, say, give or take 50k, but his strategy is to really try and push that to the limit. So when he does well, when things fall in his favor, there's a lot of luck in his strategy, but he plays for the luck. He'll finish in the top 100 instead of 20k or something. When it goes badly, he'll finish 600,000 or whatever it is. And that's because his strategy allows a very, very wide margin of error. There'll be other people, and maybe you're a good example of this, Joe, where your standard deviation from your average finish will be quite narrow. But that's because the strategy you employ tries to remove a lot of the variance around the edges. But in terms of skill, you could both be quite similar. But one of you steers into the high standard deviation, and one steers away from it.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Late Riser's strategy it's basically either win it or get a million. I mean, variations of that, but he'll either be in the top 100 or as he did this season, not so well. But that's because he takes those risks there. But I don't know if my strategy will ever get me into the top 100. I've had one top 1,000 finish, but pushing on to that top 100 is another thing.
And on that, last point in the chat from Mark O'Leary, and take your point on Werner as well. He says, you didn't have to start with him. It's about identifying it. Completely agree. He just mentioned separate the decision and the outcome. I know that's a bit of a meme, but it's so true, right? You can have some real solid reasoning and it doesn't come off. It's important not to throw out the reasoning because of outcome. It's important to, identify strategy and dissect that, not the outcome.
Before we move on to some of the lessons that we've learned from this season and also, just in general about FPL, just to mention a few rough with the smooths. I'm just going to go with smooths, I'm just being kind at the moment. And Late Riser, who we just mentioned, is known for his late rising maverick skills and usually does well in the second half of the season. And so it's transpired. He's overcome a lot of misfortune early on. And he and Karen, Scoutcast regular, Karen, they both got Aguero in and captained him. Many people did that out of sentimentality.
I love so much that came off. I didn't have the cojones, but I love so much that came off.
They had nothing to lose and they wanted to do it. And Aguero is a player that for both of them, whether it be City fan or as an FPL manager, had meant a lot to them. And so they did that. And it worked out. Got a lovely haul from them. Just want to mention Brimble82, who got Kane and Willock in. A lot of people were transferring Kane out. He not only got Kane in and Willock in. for Bruno Fernandes and Calvert-Lewin. So a very nice return there. Lovely way to finish the season. And Amy, I've got to mention here, she's the best. Triple captained Joe Willock. You talk about your triple captainship. She left her triple captainship for Gameweek 38. Decided to I'm just going to use it. Whatever.
Oh, I adore that.
Who will I put it on? Who would triple captain Joe Willock in Gameweek 38? Well done. So I mean, that's amazing.
We speak about FPL, we speak about it very seriously, but end of the day, it's a fun game. Saving that triple captain for the last week is the way. That's so good.
There is no nothing more fun than captaining Joe Willock on Gameweek 38 and it triple captaining and it coming off. So yeah, we're going to move on to some lessons learned. So what we do is we're going to look at our teams, and like when people tell you about their dream the previous night, we don't want to dwell too much on because people start glazing over a bit. But we'll hopefully relate. What we do is we'll relate it to what other people have been going through during the season, and I've seen a lot of people. I think Az may have mentioned it on Twitter as well. Been a similar thing to me this season with. The first half of the season, absolutely diabolical. The second half of the season, much better, much better. So for me, my lessons learned is sort of halfway through. I'm pretty happy with my last half of the season. The first half, I was 4 million, a million. But the second half, I only got a couple of red arrows, virtually all greens, and ended up sort of not where I wanted to from the start, but by then, relatively, top 100k, I'll take that. Game weeks 1 to 17, which is up to January the 1st, my average weekly score was 59. Now, back in the day, that was good. An average score of 59 would get you a very high rank. By then, I was outside the top million. That was nothing. But game weeks 18 to 38, my average weekly score, and yes, this is, the double game weeks, the use of chips as well, really bumps it up. But it was 68. So 60, I was getting on for nearly 70 points a week on average. And so you're beefed up by the chips and double game weeks. So that showed that I planned around those well. I indeed got extra points successfully for my free hit and bench boost. Not my triple captain. I captained Salah again. And that didn't work out. But for the rest of those, and my second wild card, that worked a treat as well. Involved getting players like Chris Wood in. And addressed lots of problems. I took 10 hits this season, so it's 40 points it cost me. And that's about 3 more than I usually spend. I usually are sort of 6, 7. I think you need to take hits every now and again. But I think 10 was a little bit higher than I should have done. And
I found I used a lot this year as well. I think there was something, obviously, right, postponed matches, weirdness, but there was definitely something about this season which led us into needing to knee-jerk players around a bit more.
And this is something other people can do. Have a look at your Game Week 1 side. Get a bucket because you might be sick, but here's my one. So I got, and it's less the score, so I actually got a little bit above average. So I got 55 points, and the average was 50 that week, so it's quite a high scoring week. The problem is we talked about rules. There are certain rules that I've used in all of those seasons where I did well, and I didn't use them this time. And the key rule, as we mentioned, is being flexible. And I didn't do it. And I don't know what was going on through my tiny little brain. Because I got Robertson, Alexander-Arnold, Eric Dyer, Eric Dyer, Walker Peters and Mitchell. So I had a spread there. But why did I have Robertson and Alexander-Arnold? I should have just got one in. And I could have used that money elsewhere. I don't know why I did that.
At the beginning of the season, it was a popular strategy. I had Robertson and Alexander-Arnold as well, and it worked very well the year before. I had both of them almost the entire season.
I was using a rule from the previous season, expecting it to all happen again, and it didn't. And in my midfield, I had Souček, Aubameyang, Salah and St Maximin. So out of those, I was fine with Souček. I thought he was a really handy first sub. Trouble is, in my setup, I had to play him every week. And although he did quite well some weeks, not every week. Aubameyang I was happy with, worth a go. Salah, he was the guy to captain. If I'd have captained him, I'd have got about 6 points more, because Aubameyang did okay as well. Or was it 6 points? No, I would have got over 10 points more. But up front, I had Adams and Werner. Werner's worth a go. But going back, I think it was Mark said in the chat that I should have gone for like Harry Kane, for example. Just a tried and tested player with pedigree who's expensive. And if Harry Kane hadn't done well and Werner had, game week 2 or 3, I'll just move him. Just get him, switch him around, make that move. But Werner Harry Kane, you need an extra 2 million.
You say that though, but game week 1, Harry Kane played Everton at home and lost 1-0, got 2 points.
Yeah.
Timo Werner did he get an assist in the first one? He got 5 points. So you, in theory, could have started with Harry Kane and moved him to Timo Werner. And then the next week, Harry Kane got 21 points. So I don't know about that.
Well, I wouldn't have made the move after 1 week for a start.
Okay.
Because of Harry Kane's, pedigree over many years of doing well. So say, for example, looking back, what would I have done differently? So obviously this is some with hindsight, but the reason I flagged up my Game Week 1 side is because it's completely uneven. And one thing I've often done, get the most expensive defender, most expensive midfielder, most expensive striker. And if you're wrong, move down. If you're right, great. And the problem I have is that if you're wrong, like I was, about something, you can't move away. And I had too much in defence. And so I'm going to go sort of back to basics for me. And I'm going to try and employ the most flexible system I have. The thing about, say, Kane, I would have given him an extra week or two because it's Kane. He's special, like Salah's special, Fernandes is special. These are top players, and then moved to Werner. And Werner didn't quite do what I hoped he would. But by then I could not get to Kane. For example, towards the end of this season, I couldn't get to Alexander-Arnold. In the end, it was okay. Nat Phillips scored a goal. Robertson ended up being the better on game of 38. But
how much of that do you think is hindsight, though? So you could definitely be right, but trying to... the two expensive defenders there, I guess, those were maybe where you were putting your money. So you could have downgraded one of them and gone up. I don't know, would downgrading one of them maybe got you Harry Kane for Timo Werner? It probably would have done. If I remember, were Chelsea's fixtures quite appealing at the beginning? So I feel like... I had Timo Werner as well. I remember there was a lot of talk about... I think some people had Timo Werner and Kai Havertz. I feel like there's maybe a little bit of hindsight there where you now know Timo Werner has done poorly.
I don't think it is because it's the same principle that I've been saying since Game Week 31. And all the guests we've had on the Scoutcast and every other content I hear, Alexander-Arnold, you've got to get him in. He's essential. I think you've said it as well about Alexander-Arnold. Get him in.
Oh, the last few weeks I really enjoyed him, yeah.
And I didn't get him in at all. But somehow went up a bit on the rankings there. But at the same time, I would have loved to have got him in. I would have loved to have experienced the Alexander-Arnold points towards the end. But I found it difficult because you've got to do other issues. You get injuries and there's other moves. And you've also, at the same time, you've got to move around the fixtures as well. And, like towards the end of this season, Liverpool had great end fixtures. Leicester tailed off a bit. And as it transpired, their performances tailed off as well. Their form followed the fixtures. But the biggest error I made with this team, and at the time I thought it was a good idea, and so we can look at it with hindsight, but there is a rule here that I didn't follow, and that is to play the game week in front of you. Plan ahead, but don't forget the game week in front of you. So what I did here, on my bench I had Martial. Manchester United missed game week 1. I thought I'd be a clever old so-and-so, and I've got Martial, who everyone will want to get in for game week 2, already there. So I'm a step ahead and I can make another move. That could have worked out. But also there is the risk of it not working out. What ideally I should have done is just wait and see. Especially if a team's missing game week 1 because they're arriving late for some back. So we've got to watch players who are arriving back to the Premier League from the various international competitions they're taking part in. Got to be a little bit careful, and Martial just all season really, injuries, not fulfilling the promise, and so there is an element of hindsight, but I think in this it is an example of not following a flexibility that I should have had really. I look at that Martial. I think that was the blunder. That was the big blunder there, because there was a lot of money in that. There's a lot of money. I'm not messing around with a 5 million player there. That's what was he, nine and a half?
Yeah, I had a similar story to you with that idea of having that game week one plan. I remember because City and United weren't playing, so we all had various plans to get their players. Especially Man United ended Project Restart pretty well. Martial, I know was a midfielder last time, but I believe had done. I know he did well in the beginning of last season. I can't remember how he ended it, but a lot of us had plans for example, Martial or Fernandez, whatever. I had KDB in my sights, of course I did. And executing towards that, despite environmental stuff around us telling us not to. They maybe didn't perform as well as they could have done. They could have looked tired, or whatever you want there. Maybe sticking too rigidly to that could have been one of my mistakes. Although, I guess we'll look at my game one team in a minute. But I think for me, dare I say, a little bit of overconfidence coming off, a very healthy finish in the previous season, going, here's my strategy and I will execute because I'm smart and I know best. Well, turns out I'm not and I don't. And my first mistake, I had a good game week one, although a bit lucky. My first mistake was continuing to execute a plan that was possibly falling apart around me.
I'll just put my career up again, because that exact same point there. So 2015-16, 1, 2, 3, 4. I had my 5th top 5k finish in a row. I was cock of the walk.
That's very impressive.
I got 82,000, and that was a dreadful season. And that was about as high as I ever got that season. And then I was humbled, rightly. And then I came back and I got top 2k the next year. So I just use that as an example, exactly what you were just saying there. And chances are, if you follow that pattern, you'll come back with a really strong finish this time around. You see it so many times. Experienced managers like yourself have a bad season, they'll come back better the next one. But it's very difficult to maintain really good ranks like that period I did there.
I think I compounded mine. I think it was, and now don't get me wrong, I'm not going to lean on I was unlucky, because that's not true. Yeah. There were certainly some parts of bad luck, but also I think I compounded it with poor decisions on my part, and then having a few things go against what I wished they would, and thus those two led to me being I finished 140k really, but I was 400,000 not too long ago. Similar to yourself, I vaguely remember thinking 1.5 million at one point. After a few weeks as well, there was a lot of recovery to do, and I certainly fell into that. Yeah. Making bad decisions, things not going my way, and then compounding it with poor reactions to that as well.
Yeah, definitely. I just wanted to move on away from the game week one chat. I think with game week one, it doesn't matter if you get a poor score in game week one. You get a terrible rank, a terrible score in game week one. It's the players that you've got, because the problem with this game week one team is they were poor players and poor flexibility in my formation for weeks to come, and I was always playing catch up. And you see it a lot in game week one. Can be a bit strange sometimes, but I wasn't set up well for game week two. I thought I was, but I wasn't really, and I think that's the issue there. But I want to be more positive instead of like, ooh, I'm such a martyr for my score. I want to look at some of the things that went right, because I thought a lot of things went right this season. And I've used a few tools for this. So FPL Optimize tool is one I've looked at for this one. And this calculated my best team over the season. Ones who got me the most points. And I think there's a lot of positives from this. So this, according to this, Edison, John Stones, Dallas, Justin, Fernandez, Salah, Gundogan, Soucek, Kane, Bamford, Calvert-Lewin, and meanwhile on my bench there, so also Rans, Kufau, Robertson, and Son, and McCarthy at Southampton. And I think there's a lot to like about this, because it shows for Fernandez and Salah and Kane all well over 250 points I got for each of those. So it shows that not only did I have these good scoring players for when they got their good scores, I captained them too. I got Gundogan and Stones in clearly at the right time. Dallas, I could have had a bit more of him, but at least I had some Dallas. James Justin, I could have had more James Justin, but at least I had some of it. Edison, I very rarely go for one expensive goalkeeper. The period I had Edison in, he was magical. Just a clean sheet every week. And I don't know why I was messing around with these 4.5 lads. previously. I don't necessarily am going to do that again, but for that specific period of the season, I did really well there. I had a bit of
I think that was a nice shout. I remember you talking about it, and I think, like you say, normally expensive goalkeepers aren't the way.
Yeah.
But I think with the way Man City's defence was shaping up, with the other goalkeeping options, I think that was a really nice decision.
Well, it's like you were saying about rules. There's no rules. I always go for 2 cheap goalkeepers. Oh, going back to my Gameweek 1 side, look, I didn't do it this time. I got Ryan and Walton. I went for sort of a Brighton double. I was locked into Brighton. As it turns out, they were 3rd and 4th choice Brighton goalkeepers anyway. And so I think I will be more flexible and either just go for an Edison or get to reasonable 4.5, a 5 million goalkeeper.
My favourite thing on your team is Souček's 85, and I know you mentioned earlier maybe you're putting yourself down a bit there, but he was your 4th mid, maybe not quite perfect for you. But I remember you holding him for a very long time, and then having to use him because not having a better option on the bench, and basically getting all of his points. I also had Souček for a while. He was in my Gameweek 1 team. And the last few seasons, he basically gets a goal on average every 3 games. I don't think he scored for the first 5 or 6 weeks. And I very quickly lost patience with that and benched him or whatever. And I had the opposite experience to you. Well, I benched all his good points or even transferred him out. Whereas I think you said you weren't a massive fan of it, but I think it worked really nicely for you. You just sat him there, which is exactly what he's meant to do. Yeah. He is meant to sit there for 10 weeks and average 3 goals over that time. They could be 3 in a row or, the 1st, the 5th and the 10th game. That's not the point. The point is you soak them up up over a period of time and it allows you to do other things with your squad. I think you played that nicely.
What I didn't like about him is that it created a lack of flexibility. I was forced to play him every week. But what I did like, the outcome, is one of those outcome decision things. It's not something I'm particularly keen on. But the outcome ended up being great because, as you said, everyone's going, I've benched Souček's goal again. And I was like, I'm playing him every week. I have to. It's either him or Basuma or Mitchell at Palace. So, there is something to be said about that. And that goes back to Capoue at Watford. If you remember, he had a similar thing. 5 million midfielder, or 4.5, I think even.
Oh, his start to the season was legendary.
And he scored every match. And everyone was going, what the hell? It was the Souček of London.
That might have been before we paid too much attention to XG, or at least that might have been too much. Before I was looking at XG much. But I vaguely recall a lot of his goals being like 1 shot, 1 goal. Yeah. It definitely feels like one of those. I mean, I don't think I had him for that reason. I remember watching it and being like, "This isn't sustainable. Shall avoid." And I mean, hey, there's a pattern here, right? I avoid players that, let's say, get their returns based on lower percentages, which maybe there's something to be said for me there, and I need to improve on that. But generally, I like to steer into higher probability players.
And other positives from this is everyone always says make money. There's a lot of everyone's always trying to make money, make early transfers to get the money, or I'm going to need that money when I wildcard. I'm going to consistently this season. I have been forced to get the cheaper player because I didn't have enough money. And consistently this season, that's paid off for me.
Do you think that's just this season, or is that something you'd carry going forward?
Multiple seasons.
Okay. See, I normally find the opposite, where I go very hard early on to preserve and build transfer value. And often it ends, I spoke about the Family League earlier. By the end of the season, I'll get to the point where in the Family League, I can afford, basically an extra premium over my family members, which is what secures the win for me. Because if, I don't know, De Bruyne, Fernandes, Salah and Kane are all going off, I could have all 4, for example, when they can't. There are
certain players, obviously, you don't want to mess around with your Kanes, your Fernandes, Salahs. But I couldn't get Cancelo, so I got Stones in. And Stones went on this incredible goal-scoring run, plus the clean sheets that all the City defenders, plus he was escaping rotation at that time. And a similar thing happened with the last game of the season. Kept that tradition going. Got Robertson in because I couldn't afford Alexander-Arnold. If I'd have got Alexander-Arnold, I'd have been 3 points down and possibly outside the top 100k. I don't know. I haven't looked at the points exactly, but I certainly would have been on less points. So there are examples where that has happened, and it's not necessarily a particular rule. That's just something that happened this season. Those John Stones, I always laugh with who is it? Randy, what's he called? Randy Shafter on Twitter. He was famously swears because he hasn't got John Stones, and John Stones was always punishing him each week. And
Did he score two? Was it in the double? He scored 2 goals.
yeah, and he scored
That
2
was,
goals in the double game week. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had him, and so I was pleased about that. So there are more positives there. Also, I was having a look at this website. The average formation I picked, which was 24 times. So the most I picked was 3-4-3, and that averaged 64 points. So my average formation 3-4-3, and I averaged 64 points. But my most successful, outside of enforced ones through benchings and double game weeks and things, was 3-5-2, where I averaged 70 points. But I only used that 4 times. It's possible, it's logical even, that I would have got slightly more points, and this could be enough to win or lose a mini league, or get in the top 10k, 50k, or 100k, whatever. It's getting that extra 5 or 6 points average every week, because logically midfielders get more than strikers. Logically, there are midfielders are increasingly, those that are classified as midfielders, increasingly deployed as strikers. Antonio, for example, and I look at that and I think I will look to a 3-5-2 more often than a 3-4-3, because I think logically there's simply more points in it, and a lot will depend on the players you can get. But I think I've got a bit hung up on, I can't get a credible 4.5 striker, but I can get, say, Basuma, a 4.5 midfielder. I think I've got a bit hung up on that. Just get a 5 million striker even, or get a non-playing one. Get a very cheap striker and have him as your first sub. And 3-5-2, I think there's more choice with midfield, and I think there's going to be. I think the pool of strikers is increasingly poor, really, compared to midfielders.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, it's obviously going to depend on the available personnel we have and the budget we can assign to that. But similarly, like you, I had 3-4-3 most often, but 3-5-2 was my most profitable. I had a very good 4-3-3 as well, only 1 point further behind on the average. But typically over the history of my time playing FPL, I preferred 3-5-2 when I can, because I think the most opportunity for points exists in midfield.
Exactly.
Someone like Alexander-Arnold maybe box that, but you can have him in a 3-5-2. Yeah. Of course, this is going to be situation dependent. This is not one of those ones to write a rule. I think it's maybe just, if you have the opportunity, go for it.
Yeah, no, I think so. I think I'm going to be using 3-5-2 more often. And I think consistently, that's a picture that's appeared consistently across many campaigns. I don't think that was peculiar to this year. Because midfielders just get more points. They at least get 3 points. If they do nothing and they don't concede, they get 3 points rather than 2. Add that up over the season. And if that happens consistently, you've got an extra 38 points. That's a big difference.
It probably depends really on just where we can find that. What do you reckon, like £5-6 million player? Is there a starting? Callum Wilson, when he was at Bournemouth, he was probably about 5-6 million, and I think he scored some good goals at the early part of that season. If he's an option, maybe there's the 3-4-3 for you. But if oh goodness, I don't know who's a good midfielder one. Maybe a Mason Mount sort of price range, probably a bit expensive. If you can find good 4th and 5th midfielders, that leads you naturally into that formation. So of course it's dependent on personnel, but if the situation lines up, that probably is the most profitable formation.
Yeah. And just find a bit on my team, because I've got a couple of, I'll finish off with a couple of overall lessons that aren't necessarily to do with my team, just in general. But here's the last bit of my team, and this is from the FPL Retro website, which is another tool to analyse your season. And this is on transfers. It just shows the number of hits I've taken, and that cost me 40 points. And it's got this nice tool here about your best and your worst transfer. And I quite like this. This is another positive as well. My worst transfer all season was Jimenez and Harvey Barnes to Bamford and Son. And that cost me 10 points because that week Barnes scored a goal. Bamford and Son didn't. But then as the season went on, Bamford and Son proved far better options than Jimenez, who got injured, and Barnes, who then later got injured and was also quite sporadic in his scoring. So I feel if that's my worst transfer all season, that's a success, I think. The best transfer though, this is where I got 24 points by moving Grealish and Ings out in Gameweek 26 to Son and Kane. So I would have liked to have seen my best transfer to be better, but I'm quite happy with that. But it's more a mediocre best transfer. And total points I transferred in were nearly 300, and total points transferred out 78. So not often. Far more often my transfers worked out for me and the net benefit from transfers, including hits, was 180. So transfers and playing the game rather than set and forget, leaving a ghost team, it actually worked out. I got 180 extra points by actually making moves. So that's quite nice as well, that the time you spend making transfers actually pays off. But it would have been nice to have seen that a bit higher, but I'm quite reasonably happy with that. A couple of overall lessons. This is not just about for me, this is everyone. I'll just put a picture of the top 10 players while I chat about this, so people can look at that. That's got the likes of Fernandes, Kane, Salah, Son, Bamford. But overall lessons: avoid the noise, and no one is essential. I've headlined that. So basically, this is something that I've been doing over the season, and I think I've referred to it as being casual, and I think people misinterpret that as like just not doing anything, and it's not. It's cutting down the noise, is cutting down all the amount of content and information that you're getting, and just home in and go for quality over quantity. If you look at your Twitter feed, if you're following more than about 200, 300 people, cut. If you see things that are mentioned on Twitter or forums you just don't agree with, doesn't chime with you, just mute them. And people are too scared to use these tools on social media. Just cut down on the noise. It's too much information. I mean, I have to deal already, on my Facebook thing and whatever, WhatsApp. I've got friends of mine who are posting pictures of their blooming dinner and what they're drinking. And so I've got about 20 people's meals in my head. I mean, that's too much to deal with as it is, but let alone
you're so ruthless.
2,000 people's views about a transfer in. And it's too much. You can't deal with that amount of information. So don't get consumed by the clamour, this sort of fear of missing out. Don't get consumed by one player. So ignore that as best as you can. And it's tough to do, but just cut away all the noise. Just get rid of it all. So, and the other one,
Joe, a couple of people just asking what site you're using for this.
For this one here, the one that's on the screen.
For the two pieces of information we've shared so far.
Rightio. Yes, sorry. The ones that I used about transfers, and we've got for when we go to your team as well, we've got the similar screen. So FPL Retro is very good. A whole bunch of tools on there, and FPL Optimized, both of those. Do have a search for them, on Google, and also have a look on Twitter for them. But they're both very good tools that I used. It's just very. Talk about cutting down on the noise. It's just nice layout, nice and graphic, just nice to have a look at. So yeah, cut down on the noise. And also the other one is something.
I just going to add a point to that, if I may, if that's all right. I was just thinking, and again prompted by Mark O'Leary in the chat, so thank you again for that. I wonder if, and I don't mean you, I mean anyone, you often go to social media with an agenda, even if you don't know you are. So we've spoken a few times, thinking fast and slow. We spoke about that a little while ago. But you'll already know possibly what you want to do. And then you go to Twitter looking for confirmation, which means you'll confirmation bias yourself into doing it anyway. You'll listen to the things that affirm your point of view, and you will ignore the things that reject your point of view, which is not the point of having this information available to you on Twitter. I think, obviously, the opposite as well. If you don't know what you're going to do and then you get 6 million opinions, which I guess is more what you're saying, that's also not helpful. I think, for me, the thing I like about having lots of opposing opinions on Twitter, and of course, you do need to be able to filter that out. So maybe that means you don't look at it too often, or you don't look at it right before the deadline, is I like it giving me ideas that I hadn't thought of. So I'll certainly have a thing I know I want to do. Within seconds, we all know what transfer we want to make because it's instinctive. The skill is not the instinct. The skill is then dissecting that and often going against your instinct if you think there's a better move, or sticking with it despite maybe the noise. So the thing I like is to have the things that I hadn't thought of. So people making moves that hadn't occurred to me, or pointing out stats or highlights in matches that I hadn't seen. If I already know what I'm going to do, I'm just going to confirmation bias myself into it. So at that point, there's not much point looking. So I go looking for ideas often as anything else.
I think that's good. Well, that's the best way to handle it, and that's how I try to use Twitter. Because, so for example, and we mentioned him a couple of times already. Late Rising, completely different manager to me, completely different FPL manager to me. But I will follow him and take on board what he says because it's completely different. And I might think no. But I might think, I didn't think of that. And that's exactly that thing. But what you mentioned about the confirmation bias, you've basically got on most people's Twitter feed, they've got thousands of people all going to Twitter with their own view. So I don't often put my team up before deadline because I don't care what 6,000 people think of that transfer. I don't care. I care what some people think. I don't care who cares what 6,000 people think about moving a particular player in. I do care perhaps how specific 10 people think, and these aren't people just in a bubble of content creators, because I'm not like that with Twitter. I don't see how many followers they've got. It could be someone with like 2 followers, but they've got the most expert advice around, and I'll listen to that. But not 6,000. It's just too much. It's too much.
There's an interesting thing on the wisdom of crowds, and I genuinely don't know if it applies here, because obviously this is kind of a skill-based thing, and I guess what I'm going to talk about is more an estimation-based thing. But humans are very, very bad at like making estimates, predictions. We are very bad at them individually. What's the weather going to be tomorrow? Without any information, we don't know. The example that comes to mind is, I think there was a study done on, the old game where you have to guess how many sweets are in a jar. Individually, humans are very, very bad at that. They miss by a long way. But if you get 100 people to guess how many sweets are in that jar and take the average of all their guesses, it's often very, very close to the truth. So, and again, I don't know if this applies to FPL, because obviously it's not just an estimation thing, there's a lot more into it. But there is something in the wisdom of crowds. And rather than listening to an individual, maybe sticking up a poll, we do the captain poll on the website, right? Yeah. It tends to often end on quite a good choice. So even if some crazy person captains a goalkeeper and, someone else goes with, I don't know, a defender who isn't going to play, and someone else picks the obvious option, the mean result is probably going to be a relatively beneficial decision for us all. Again, just a super caveat there with, I'm not sure how it applies to FPL, but the estimating a number of sweets in a jar, it's surprisingly accurate if you get lots of opinions.
And linked in with the noise is something I picked up on this season much more, is this whole unfashionable player thing that I've been talking about the last few weeks. And I've been putting these tables up, and they proved stunningly accurate. The likes of Chris Wood, Joe Willock, Ferran Torres before his hat-trick. It's pinpointing those sorts of players. And it was a simple thing of just simply looking at the stats or looking at performance and thinking, well, which players wouldn't I get? Why? Perhaps I should get them. And that's the sort of player you should be getting. And that means you have to avoid a lot of noise. When I wildcarded, I didn't go on Twitter and say, I'm getting Chris Wood in, because I knew exactly what the response would be. I'll get 6,000 people saying, Burnley striker, are you getting a Burnley striker? And, I've already got 20 people's meals on my Facebook page every day. I don't need 6,000 people that. And then I've got to think, why are they thinking that as well? So what I'm really into is progressing that more next season. And I like this sort of blind transfers or blind transfer decision to look at the stats and then just blot. I'm hoping make it a Scoutcast, regular. You've got the table, but you blank out the names. You've just got this player is top here with an expected goal involvement per 90 or whatever, absolutely top amongst strikers. And then you move it away like the Masked Singer, and oh my God, it's Chris Wood. Oh my God, it's Joe Willock. And that's the surprise. But then you think, why aren't I getting these players in? Amy, triple captains, Joe Willock, Gameweek 38. She's always going to remember that. Who isn't going to remember that? That's what FPL is all about. So I like that, and I think I want to progress that a bit more and try and address my own personal biases about players or teams, and try and just free myself of that and just go, no, I think objectively this is a great player to get in. Just now, it's also going to be I suppose in a way your own personal bias and avoiding personal bias, but that's something to adapt.
For me, you've nailed it there. When you first raised this a few weeks ago, we discussed it again with the thinking fast and slow sort of analogy in there. And it's that I think Burnley are bad at scoring goals. I think Burnley strikers aren't attractive, or cheap strikers aren't attractive. Yeah. Therefore, it doesn't matter what numbers say, because I have a preformed opinion of this, therefore discounting information. And that is super good at stopping you getting hit by trucks. Hear loud noise, run other direction. Super good. Good that our brain does that. Very bad for FPL, because you have these these shortcuts in your brain that are good instinctively at keeping you alive. They are bad at making decisions that require a higher cognitive load. For example, assessing 50 strikers and lots of stats and watching matches and deciding which is the optimal approach.
So, yeah, I mean, Joe Willock, Chris Wood, John Stones. I've got John Stones in. All I got, John Stones is rubbish. Well, hey presto, he wasn't. Jesse Lingard is washed up. Hey presto, he wasn't for a very beautiful period of the season. So yeah, anyway, they're my two main lessons. Let's move on to you. Game week 1. Here's your game week 1 side. It's good. It's good, but didn't kick on. So yeah, just take us through your game week 1 side. You've got 75 points. Big difference between my side and yours is you Leicester. Lots of Leicester in there.
Yeah. Oh, at this point, I thought, hey, I'm so clever. I'm going to do all again. Not quite. There's a very lucky player in there. So McCarthy in goal for 2 points. Alexander-Arnold with 1. James Justin with 9. Andrew Robertson with 4 points. Andrew, to full name in there. So Maximan, a lot of us had him. He ended Project Restart well, I think. I think we thought he was going to play number 10. He started on the left. He got 3 points for me. I quickly moved him out. Thomas Suchek with 2 points. Spoken about him. Aubameyang captain with 14. I think that's a move a lot of people made, right? We thought there was some good gains to be made there, and he was a really good placeholder for your City or Manchester United.
That was a good move, actually, as well.
And then Mo Salah, vice captain, 20 points against Leeds United on the first day. Shea Adams up front, loved his numbers. He just could not convert them. He got 2 points. Timo Werner, covered him enough with 5 points. And then Jamie Vardy with 13. Those 13 points were, I believe, 2 penalties with 0 shots outside of those penalties. So that was very fortunate. You know, that was me going, oh, Leicester, I think, did they have a good fixture? What was it? Did they play one of the newly promoted teams? I want to say, well, it's not showing me. Was it Fulham? West Brom. There we go. They won 3-0. Vardy got 2 penalties. So, oh, yeah, Vardy, good attacker against newly promoted side. Lucky outcome, though. I was not predicting 2 penalties. It was also when penalties were that, I don't know if they were handballs or whatever, but we were high on penalties early in the season, weren't we? And then a pretty cheap bench. I like my cheap benches. In the past, you know, we're talking over courses of seasons now, not just this season. This season, a strong bench has actually been good because of all the nonsense with fixtures. But generally, I would actually advocate for a very cheap but playing bench. You get your money in the team, especially early in the season. You need your money working for you. So I've got Nyland, Mitchell, Burke, and Ferguson on the bench, who got 6 points between them.
What the difference between this and my one is not just Leicester and obviously Vardy getting 2 goals out of like his penalties and not doing much else. It's the fact that you had Vardy there and I had Martial instead of Vardy, and Martial on my bench not working for me.
Jamie Vardy became Martial for me in game week 2.
Yeah. Well, if I'd have done that move, I'd have still been about 20 points. I've been 13 points better off for that particular move. Play the game week in front of you. And I think that is a lesson I'll definitely take into next season.
Although I will say, you know, I spoke earlier about maybe sticking to this strategy that caused me some problems. I'm not going to flick all the way through now, but I think if I recall, it was Vardy to Martial and then Aubameyang to KDB very quickly, and then James came in as well for me. James was more I actually kind of wish I started the season with him. I was very close to doing it. And then I wildcarded for Tottenham boys later. But the KDB and Martial moves in for Vardy and Aubameyang, and I'm not saying losing Vardy and Aubameyang was bad, but I'd sort of pin those transfers in from the summer. I was doing it. That was my strategy. I knew my game week 1 team, and then I knew what I was going to morph into. And I think after a couple of weeks of seeing City and United not quite performing to what they could have done because late European involvement, not much rest over the summer, I possibly stuck too rigidly to that plan, which we spoke about having rules and plans and not being flexible. I think that was my very first mistake. And it possibly set me on a slightly slippery slope of not quite recovering from that and not adapting appropriately.
And also,
for example, Kane and Son. I left that in for quite a while.
The notable absences, Kane and Son, same in my first team. And yes, okay, so Kane only did blank in the first week, but then him and Son did ever so well. But it was what I know why I didn't get them, because Spurs' early season schedule was brutal. They were playing like a game every 2 days practically. They were in the qualifications for Europe. They had this really punishing schedule. They had like no rest. We know what Kane's like with no rest as well. He's traditionally a slow starter coming into August. I think it took him quite some time, quite a few campaigns down the line for him to actually score in August. It was a thing, wasn't it? Kane can't score in August. And I didn't do it. But the thing was, Spurs were really great at the beginning. So clearly more games helped them.
They were very good at converting those chances. We had the whole, XG and big chances discussion. Spurs weren't good as a team. They were not good at all. I know they were very high up to start with, but their results were not deserving based on their performances. But hey, it's FPL. We don't really care about actual team performance that much. It's about how Son and Kane do. And again, their returns were very, very impressive and possibly not entirely sustained over the long term by those numbers. But we know they are good at converting the types of chances they got. It was it's a very low percentage, high reward play, I think, starting with those two or even picking them up early. But it paid off handsomely for people who did. And when that kept happening over the course of a few weeks, it went from sort of, I don't know what, a low percentage, not lucky, but a low percentage play to a reasonable decision. And I, in fact, wildcarded to get those two in. And it improved my early season form, actually.
Yeah. So, people can think about specific players, but I think the overarching thing from that, same with my start, be flexible. Be flexible. And, watch out. You don't know what's going to happen. What you think will happen might not happen.
Game week 1 in general is an interesting one because we have all summer, we build up to it. It's so important. We look at, all the preseason friendlies. We have forever to tinker with our team. We put so much on it. And people are absolutely right. A good start is great for the season. And, you don't get unlimited transfers in game week 2 unless you use your wild card. So, of course, having a useful team is a very good way to start the FPL season. But I think it can be slightly overblown. Yeah. Like, we could possibly, if you start well, you could then be reluctant to start making more adventurous moves. If you start poorly, it could kick you into making adventurous moves that mean you more quickly respond to the situations presented to us in a new season. And I'm not really sure which side I fall on. Typically, when I start well, I do well. But that season that I was 200th and then 14,000th, I started really, really well. I was like top 100 for a bit. Well, it clearly didn't help that much. I drifted off in relative terms. And then this year I started kind of okay, drifted off and then did badly. I think we can put too much into it, and it's more about how you respond. And this comes back to your point, Joe, with sometimes maybe it's not the exact players that are important. No, of course, the players are important. But it's how quickly can you move out of a game week 1 team into something different.
Run away from it.
And I'm not saying I'm not saying be so super strict on structure that you can't possibly have that player that's in form or you can't respond to fixtures. But maybe don't price yourself out of making, big moves early on or cost yourself 8 and 12 points when you could cost yourself 4. I do think early hits can be very profitable though. We can be nervous about it, but you have all season to make those points back.
Yeah, and I think you will, and I think it's shown that you can as well. I've got your team of the year, so more positive. For this is from FPL Optimized. You got that on your notes? You can go through. So yeah, this is your team of the year. Do you want to go through that? Some of the players.
No problem. So Martinez in goal, just like everyone else, probably, apart from you with Edison. Only 57 points for me, though. So talking about, there's a theme going to come out in a minute. Identifying things late this year. So Martinez. Robertson with 94, Cancelo 77, Alexander-Arnold 70. Then Salah with 201 and 9 captains. Fernandes with 194. So both of those lower than yours.
Yeah.
Kevin De Bruyne 162
and
Son 140. Oh, sorry.
Difference. 100 points difference of those two players alone in terms of captaincy.
The interesting difference between our two was I've got Salah 201, Fernandes 194, De Bruyne 162, and Son 147 as my midfield. So, decently high scores as like an average and all quite premium. Whereas you've got Fernandes and Salah with over 250, and then Gundogan and Souček with 94 and 85. You can, talking about liking midfield, you can clearly see the strategies there.
Yeah.
But then you've got Kane with 262. I've got Kane with 140.
Yeah,
so I didn't go off far of, half a number of points on him. And then possibly down to captains as well. You captained him nearly twice as often as me. And then Watkins and Bamford rounding out my my full team as well with 100-ish points both. So I think already, you finished higher than me, so you're going to have more points. But there's that really interesting difference between the midfielders.
I've got more points from Bamford than you.
If we want to come on to my lessons learned, Leeds is top of my list.
Yeah. They were the star. They were the star team, definitely. Yeah. They were the Wolves.
So this is the first time that I've ever played FPL with the team that I support in the Premier League. And again, we talk about coming off a good season and being arrogant. I thought, no stress. I've heard people talk about it. You support your team, you do FPL. It's a separate thing. No worries. I'd like to think I know Leeds very well, but I was aware I could have a bias. So I entered the season by going, I won't have any Leeds players because it will avoid a conflict of emotions. It will avoid me, I don't know, clinging on to Bamford because I think he's great, but no one else does. If you think back to September, that probably was the opinion most people had. But it ended up going the opposite way for me. It played against me. I avoided Leeds players instead of preferring them because I was a Leeds fan. Maybe you might prefer Brighton players. I avoided them and was aware that, oh no, I might like them too much. So I'll just avoid them. We saw Dallas came out. We saw Bamford come out. And I was like, no, I'll just steer clear of it. So I somehow managed to not bias myself towards Leeds, but bias myself against them and ended up doing the exact opposite of what I intended to do, but for the same wrong reason.
It depends on the team, because obviously I'm relatively new to being an FPL player with my team, Brighton. But especially under Potter, I'm blessed with him massive rotation a lot of the time. And also a sort of setup whereby there isn't like a Bamford. There isn't that 15 goal a season striker. And so there's just often simply better alternatives for other teams in FPL. But when Houghton was manager, I would often have a Brighton defender, because a Brighton defender at home, they've traditionally been very good and value. And Gross was someone who was in my team a lot, and Glenn Murray was the one who was in my team a lot. But yeah, I mean, if I was a Leeds fan, yeah, the likes of, say, Dallas, Bamford, Rafinha, they played every week, apart from injury. And so you're quite lucky there. It's annoying because they're all going to be priced really high next season. But I guess you would probably go for them next time if they were valued okay.
I have one in mind, and everyone listening who's listened even one time before can probably guess. But yeah. Stuart Dallas is going to be a £6 million midfielder, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Luke Ayling, I'm hoping, will still be a £4.5 million defender. I have my eye on him. Now, don't get me wrong, if we sign a right back, or I don't think we will, but if we do, or if we have bad fixtures, I'm not going to go into him just because I love him. But I think there could be a little play there. I think a lot of people will go for Dallas without him maybe being as good as he was this season, because at the very least, he'll be a midfielder.
Yeah, so I mean, looking at your team, so there are differences with my one, but there are more positives. You've got way many more players that you got at least 100 points for than I did, whereas mine were clustered around certain players. So I was glad that Fernandes, Salah, Kane did me so well all the season.
The interesting thing on those Salah, Fernandes, De Bruyne type picks, I don't know if you've got the graphic there, Joe, but where it shows the spread of when you had the player.
Right, I'll get this as well, because this is from FPL Optimized, I think, and it's timing of ownership. So I've got this is your team from with Salah, Fernandes, Bamford, and Son, and what they show is the sort of greedy grey areas when you actually had them in your lineup. If they're purple, that's when you bench them, and if there's no colour there, that's when you didn't have them. So it shows when you had them for their hauls or lack of hauls, essentially.
And there's a multiplication on there as well, times 2, times 3, which shows captains or triple captains. You have all 4. So one of the things I went for this season is I didn't have Salah Fernandes, as you can see, for a big chunk there. And both of them I didn't have for quite a while after that Game Week 27 wildcard, I think I did. Yeah. And I obviously took out Salah first. I actually think that is one of the few things I played well. If you look at how I gathered their points, I probably got most of the peaks there and avoided some of the serious troughs. That is basically the move that changed me from 400k to 130 in the end, going that different direction. Yeah. As a contrast, if you look at Son and Bamford, I think that nicely highlights how I managed to capture the opposite. Yeah. Capture a lot of their poorer scores and miss their good scores. You can see Bamford there so clearly with my weird fuddlement over Leeds and how I missed all those early scores, then finally went into him and managed to get his low scores, got rid of him, missed a high score, went back to him, had loads of low scores. I played that very, very poorly. We spoke about it on here a few times, actually. We identified, some good trends with him when he was in form, when he wasn't in form. I just executed very poorly on my own team. And then Son sort of shows a similar thing there, but most importantly, it shows how, and this is for everyone, his highest peak there is in Game Week 2 when he got 4 goals, all assisted by Harry Kane, I believe it was. Yeah. That just shows that how many of his points came in that week. And if people didn't get that, I don't think you can blame yourself because the signs weren't there. Anyone who did get it Not saying that's luck, fair enough. But no one saw 4 goals coming or whatever it was. But it's more about then how I played it afterwards. And there's a lot of troughs there that I've managed to capture, which is not ideal, especially when Gareth Bale came in.
But there is a trend with that, with Son, and in the past it's been, say, Van der Vaart, Bale. It's been these midfielders at Spurs. It's really hard to predict their hauls, and they do haul. Traditionally over the years, I've always had big hauls from Spurs midfielders, and I've always dodged them as well. I've got them and dodged them, and loads of people have. Get them in.
Son's done me really well in the past. I wonder if, we talk about strategies and learnings from previous seasons and whatnot. Before this season, Son was a nailed-on move when Kane got injured, because he would move to the centre, he would get chances, he would score goals. He also was, and I don't normally talk about this because it's not something I think carries that much weight, he was quite a streaky player, probably because he was playing up front when Kane was injured. But often his points would all come in groups together for whatever reason, fixtures, form, if that's that's what you want to call it, or because Kane was injured. And I used to be quite good at capturing that. This year, his role changed a lot. His points actually came alongside Kane this year, or when Bale came in, they got better and then got worse again. So the Son strategy in isolation changed this year. And I don't think I dealt very well with that. No. Speaking of which, along those lines, something else I would take from this season, and I know about myself just generally playing FPL, I am good at identifying, say, trends that are well evidenced. And I know that sounds super obvious. Of course we all are. But what I actually mean is things like your goals imminent table. So something where someone isn't scoring goals, but the underlying numbers, or you're seeing them on Match of the Day going close constantly. I am very good at picking those up. I think, I hope that doesn't sound arrogant. I think that's one of my strengths. And getting on those players that are showing strength, but not actually getting the returns yet and taking advantage of it. Last year when I had a good season, I did it with Danny Ings, James Maddison, Jamie Vardy, a couple of others that I forget. Got on them early, got returns that looked like they were well backed up. On the flip side of that, I am very poor at picking up returns that come out of nowhere, might be the wrong way of putting it, but your Lingard, for example. We have no history to suggest that he was going to do what he started doing. However, when he started doing it, his numbers were super impressive. But maybe I fell into that bias of going, but he hasn't done in the past, so he's not on my radar. And I don't think I ever picked Lingard, because by the time I got around to having a space for him, he was kind of a bit done with those numbers and those returns. Similar seasons when Aaron Ramsey, Yaya Toure, people like that have done really, really well. Those often coincide with my poorest seasons because I'm either bad at picking up on, trends that come out of nowhere, or I'm slow to pick up on them. I'm not sure which it is, but that's when I do poorest.
Well, I'm just going to back that up with a slide of your transfers. But just before you do, you mentioned the goals imminent table, because I've got to mention this. Game week 38, okay. Essentially top, because Jota was top, but second was Fornals, scored 2. So Fornals was on there. The goals imminent table predicted a return from him, and he got 2. Kane was next. McGoldrick both scored as well. A few others on there. Redmond, he's always there. And Alexander-Arnold was there, and Werner. But the Fornals, Kane, McGoldrick were all predicted there. So it does show that there was this season has shown me a lot of faith in underlying stats, and I know from what you were saying. Just want to have a look at your transfers. This is from the FPL Retro tools there, and once again, this is exactly what you were saying. That move: Fernandes out, Sterling out, game week 27, to Bale and De Bruyne. Both had their moments from game week 27 onwards, and Fernandes did pretty much nothing. So that was, as you were saying, you spotted that trend there. And there was a trend with Bale, perhaps playing for a new contract, I don't know. But, who certainly had a haul or two in him. And your worst transfers, same as my one, hardly anything. You did Souček and Bamford out to Gundogan and Calvert-Lewin in game week 21.
I remember that one, though.
But it only cost you 12 points. And I got Gundogan in around that time, and he was great. And I think lots of people did.
That whole transfer there, that whole move is a really good example. It illustrates my weakness quite well, I think, which is Souček. I can't even remember why I had him again, probably because price or whatever. I think he might have scored that week, and I think Bamford might have scored 2. Every chance Gundogan did, I guess Calvert-Lewin didn't. The Bamford story is all in there, taking him out, bringing him in at the wrong times, not getting over my Leeds bias. And then Gundogan, I was slightly late to that. I think his were backed up by the numbers, but I had the City priorities, I believe, so a bit late to that one. But that whole move there, even though it's not too many points to lose, I think it nicely sums up my failings this season. And hopefully, the positive transfer move there for 30 points is something I can do more of in the future, which is making sort of rational, evidenced decisions. I just need to improve. Maybe I'm slow to them because someone like Lingard did have the numbers, but maybe it took me too long to come round to the idea of taking advantage of him as the pick.
I think in terms of your worst transfer, if it's only 12 points with 1 week, and that was the worst thing all season, I think that's pretty good. I think we can round off with.
Have you seen my benching points?
Oh, let's have a look at that again.
It's on top right in there. Game week 23, 29 points.
Oh yeah.
That was one of the. So I know you often say about you don't like points on your bench. I don't mind points on my bench. I'd rather have points in my team than not because it means I've got the right players.
I'd like to own them rather than not own them.
Yeah,
but better to play them. Yeah.
Well, no, naturally, and that was a mistake. So I guess maybe the last little thing I want to look at for next season. And again, it's not a rule. It's not well, don't bench players or do bench players. I made some poor decisions there, and I'd rather have those points in my team. But that 29 points isn't a week where I scored 100. I think I scored quite a low number. I made some poor selection decisions and left myself with maybe a squad that wasn't well optimized to the situation in front of me. And I think I probably benched the most points I've ever benched. That 29 points isn't an outlier. I had a 25 in there. I had a 23 in there. It was crazy.
I just put mine on the screen. Yeah, I've got the most was 16.
And
actually, my bench boost, I got 15. So for me, my bench boost was really successful because I pretty much got as much as I could have done this season from a bench boost.
Oh, nice. Yeah, my bench boost was really poor. There you go. We know why I had a poor season. Well, poorer than what I would have liked. I keep mentioning things I did poorly. My bench boost, I used that very inefficiently. I think I was one of those people who did the triple leads bench boost. Yeah. And I know exactly why I did that. I fell into the psychological trap of everyone had used it, had a few points in me. I just wanted to get it gone and used. And I didn't use it in a good week at all.
The season before, I was forced to use my bench boost in a single game week, and it was rubbish. And the bench boost this time was in a double game week. And ever since the bench boost has come in, bench boost double game week, just do it. Because Mitchell, for example, is a great example. Your Palace defender can end up with all they need is a clean sheet, and suddenly you've got 8 points from a cheap bench fodder, rather than just the 2 points. Let's have a look at some of the questions and sort of lessons learned from the community before we leave. So these are ones I'll read out. I'll read out this one. Claret Parrott says that he's learned beyond doubt, beyond reasonable doubt or beyond doubt, that you really don't need to go for that differential, as in that special player everyone's talking about. One rogue pick or captaincy every few weeks is more than enough to steal March. It's the timing that's crucial. Finally, I've learned you really don't need to take hits. Proper planning is far more important. I think that's a lot what we've been talking about than catching a player's one plum fixture. I took 0 hits this season. Okay, it took a hell of a lot of willpower, and clearly some luck too, and ended up at 436 in the overall rankings.
So I can tell us a similar story. My third best ever season, something like that. This is a long time ago. I enforced a rule on myself. I would take no hits for that entire season deliberately. Now, of course, that's not enough of a sample size to know if that's why I did well. If you're doing well, you don't need to take hits. But it was interesting because it certainly made me play in a certain way, and I quite like that.
And Claret Parrott also says, "Thanks for the Scoutcast. A real perk from working from home." Thank you. Thanks for the thanks. Do you want to read this one out from Shirtless?
Sure, absolutely. Where am I? You're shirtless. Where am I going for that one?
So I've put community questions and lessons learned, and then I've got Claret Parrott, and then is Shirtless. I can read it out of.
Yeah, you do, my friend. I'm afraid.
Okay,
I don't
yeah,
have the same list as you.
Shirtless says last year he finished with 2,618th with 2,399 points. No hits. This year finished 600k with 2,250 points. So one thing that's happened to him differently is that he didn't have a really big spike week, he calls it. And I think this is a really good point as well, that seasons where I've done well, I've mentioned it many times. The fabled Gameweek 8, which was the one where all the Southampton differentials that those in the fantasy football scout community owned, like Tadic, just went off. And at the same time, the popular captain Aguero happened to trounce Newcastle that week. It was huge. We're talking double game week scores in a single game week. And I went into the top 5k from nowhere. And that's what he's talking about there. He's talking about the need for that big spike week. So look for those as well. They can be really important. They can give you that real head start, take you from 2 million to 1 million, 1 million to 200,000. You know, it's really good to get that. Tony D was saying, same as every year, it takes too many hits. FPL T asks us for predictions on prices and positional change as well. So you've mentioned one already, Dallas. Dallas is going to be a 6 million midfielder. And I would say overall, look at the prices this season. What FPL do, they're very, okay, John Lundstrom stands out because it was the first time I can remember in 13 years FPL making a mistake of putting a midfielder as a defender and making him that cheap. But they're really annoyingly quite good at doing pricing. And what you'll find is a lot of the prices of this season, what they finish as, that's a good indicator of what they're going to end up with. And also they look at news. So they look at an understanding of rotation. How did they know that Carl Darlow was going to be a 5 million, what was he, 5 million, 5.5? Why did they say the Newcastle backup goalkeeper would be so good? And he was while he was in the team. They do know what they're doing. So have a look at the overall, just look at the prices this season. See, Raheem Sterling has gone down in price. He's going to be going down in price. Bamford, went up in price. He's going to be going up in price. It's really just look at the prices, whatever they are now. They're going to be broadly similar to what they are now, not what they started with. But yeah,
I mean, I know this is super obvious, but there are definitely edges to be found there, and that's what Fantasy Football Scout is going to spend all summer doing, I suspect, finding those players. But someone like a Dallas moving into midfield and being 6 million sounds like the opposite to me. His points potential probably goes down. Whereas, let's say a Kai Havertz and Timo Werner, mentioned them a few times, but if their price is, if Timo Werner say 8.5 million striker, Kai Havertz stays about 8.5 million midfielder, I think there's an edge to be found there because they both ended the season decently, especially in terms of their numbers and eye test as well. They looked good. Timo Werner still has that problem of being offside, but Kai Havertz especially, if they're going to be consistent in the first 11 next year, I think they could be slightly underpriced for the returns they will bring you. Of course, we're interested in fixtures there. One of my favourite ones ever was Kevin De Bruyne. It might have been a couple of seasons ago now. When he was made, was he about 9.5 million? Because he spent a large part of the previous season injured. Yeah. But when he actually played, there was no difference. Yeah, for whatever reason, I guess.
Down, you see, from previous season.
So, he was actually worth about 10.5 million, probably. But they priced him lower because I think he just spent so long injured or whatever, he didn't have the points there to back it up. We weren't sure on how he was going to play. I jumped on him immediately, and I think I had him almost all season, just as an undervalued returner of points. Those, we won't know until we see the list, but those are the ones to really take advantage of. Of course, that's what we're all looking for. And then combining them with fixtures, of course. And the classic out of position thing is always a nice thing to look for, but we really don't know that until it comes up. What do we think about, this time last year was that conversation about Aubameyang, midfielder or forward, Martial, Rashford, Salah and Mane. Yeah. What do we think they're going to do, off the back of this question? What do we think they're going to do with that this summer? And are there gains to be found there?
Well, I'll echo what I said last time. It's the Sky game made all of those players forwards, and it's not, I wouldn't say ruined it, but it ruined the classification because there was about 20 strikers forwards that you want at any one time because you've got almost anyone apart from De Bruyne in Man City was a striker. You've got Mane, Salah, obviously you've got Aubameyang as well, Sterling. You've got the Greenwood, Rashford, Martial. You've got all of those as well. So I don't think it's good for the game to make them all forwards. But there is a sort of a concern of duplicity because you think, well, why, Salah and Mane, they're essentially wingers. But then why is Aubameyang listed as a midfielder? and it goes on. Why is Martial, and why is Greenwood and Rashford? Why are they listed as they're listed? Rashford and Greenwood, will they swap around? I don't know. I mean, there is an inconsistency, but it's tough to call, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the decision they've made this year was the best one they could, because it's not just about, intuitively, apart from maybe Aubameyang, but that was because he played on the left all year. But for most of those players, Salah and Mane, we all intuitively understand that they are midfielders in that, in that super 90s understanding of positions. Even though Salah's average position is up front and Firmino's is basically in the midfield, it kind of feels more intuitively correct they are placed that way around, even though maybe that isn't how the football turns out, because we want to go with this very rigid idea of a defender, midfielder, striker. The ones that are weird are maybe when someone spends half their time in one position and half another. Rashford and Martial, decent examples of that. They swapped because Martial up front, Rashford on the left was what happened most of the time. Aubameyang could maybe swap back. I think he's probably spent, I'm not sure on this, but he's probably spent more time up front this year than he has on the left. Yeah. Salah and Mane will stay midfielders because I think we need, the other side of this is then the game side of it. Yeah. We need those big hitting midfielders for the game to work with the prices and the team structures. You can have more midfielders.
They need to give us a choice. They need to give us part of the game. And if Salah and Mane are the same price, no one's going to get Mane. But if Mane is a 1.5, 2 million cheaper than Salah, we've got a decision to make. At 9 million, no one's going to get Havertz. 7.5, 8, then you've got a decision. Because you're dealing with...
They must have those conversations.
And you need to, and they will. I'm sure they will. And you've got to price accordingly to that. Also, you often get... I mentioned about the Van Persie when he came in at 14 million in the second season at Manchester United. It's too much. I knew it was too much then. I remember lots of people saying it was essential, and I just thought, nah, it doesn't matter. I mean, even I think Ronaldo might have been 14 million. He was certainly getting that way, but he's probably the only player I've known that's worth it. I mean, none of them. Fernandes isn't worth it. Salah's not worth it. None of the current crop of players are worth 14 million, apart from your Ronaldo.
Gareth Bale was priced at that before he transferred out.
Yeah, exactly.
He was before going to Real Madrid. He was priced at that, and Thierry Henry maybe.
But it was before.
A long time ago.
I think he was going before Gameweek 1. So
but he never played a minute.
We never
experienced 14 million and never played
that as well. And of course, Gareth Bale's best.
Thierry Henry was probably the other one that was priced at that, and probably fair enough because he had 20 goals and 20 assists in him in a season.
But Kane is someone going to watch out for because he's got the assists and the goals. If he is at, say, for example, City, maybe 14 million. Maybe he is in that Ronaldo category. But if he's still at Spurs, I'm not paying 14 million.
City signing in a clinical striker could be, and I say this cautiously, but it could be the closest to an automatic pick that we've had in a long time. Whether that's Haaland, who I don't think is leaving this summer, but whether that's Haaland or Harry Kane, I don't know if Harry Kane will go to City. I think for Man City, the smarter move is Haaland. A similar level of goal scorer, but with much more career ahead of him, probably for a cheaper price, and a better sell on if that's what they want. But either way, if City sign a striker who is clinical, well, that could be very, very tasty.
Here's a couple of other thoughts from the community. Vishnav talking about holding on to premiums and fear of missing out. And I think your Bruno Fernandes out move in Game 27 is a good example of that. A lot of people... I kept him because I actually thought he was going to do well. But I know a lot of other people may have wanted to, but fear his effective ownership. So that's a good example there.
For me on them. It's players like that, players who are 12 million odd, I need to be able to captain them to get value out of them. So they're still going to be the top scorers in the game. But if I'm not going to captain them, that money spent on them is not efficiently used. So I often try and look at whether I'm going to captain them in the upcoming game weeks to decide if I need to hold on to them or not.
Robin Lennon points out, be careful of your non-playing players, especially goalkeepers. So, for example, he got Steele in. I did this exact same thing. Got Steele in, and it locked him out of a third Villa player. And Villa were packed full of value right across the park. And same with me.
I did the same, yeah.
I wanted to get Jack Grealish in for periods of the season. I don't think I got Jack Grealish in at all because I blooming Steele. I couldn't get him in. But anyway, Dave asked who are the best promoted assets. I will say, rather than listen to us, have a look at the articles that David and Neil will be doing on promoted assets on Fantasy Football Scout. Every summer for years, that has been one of my staple reads, because that analyses all of the underlying stats of their performance in the championship, but then sort of extrapolates them and assesses, tries to predict how well they would do this season. Also, it's good for news as well. So, for example, you could get a completely nailed on brilliant player, but they're actually going to be off, or they've been playing out of position, but that's not going to happen. I know that their knowledge of Leeds, for example, and Fulham, these were all invaluable in whether I got in or didn't get in players early on for them. I would say from previous research I did for the Sky game with Luke, Norwich midfielders. They are teeming with assists and goals and potential for bonus. And they look like they'll be good value. Buendia, I was reading though, is interesting Arsenal. He is interested in Arsenal. That may happen. In which case, Buendia at Arsenal could be great. Might not be. He's a wait and see for me. But for example, as we've seen, Pookie, Campbell, whole bunch of midfielders could be interesting.
Buendia's numbers are incredible.
Well, they're Premier League quality, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he did it in the Championship and the Premier League in terms of the underlying numbers. So it's more about the team in that one, isn't it? Like, if he's in a team that can help him produce those numbers and convert them into actual points, good times. But if Arsenal still struggle, he could maybe be a trap.
Yeah. Obviously, Tony at Brentford go up.
I was going to say promoted striker. There's often one there.
Promoted striker.
Tony looks like the one.
I will say, for every Bamford, there's an Ebanks Blake. So tread with caution, but they can be absolute gold. Zaki at Wigan was my second season.
Oh, I remember.
Oh.
He scored all the goals in pre-season, didn't he?
Maybe my favourite Egyptian, even more than Salah in the game. Just a few more here. Karam not jumping on bandwagons hurt him a lot. For example, Martinez, Chilwell, Gundogan, Lingard, Calvert-Lewin, Bamford. FPL Ron Manager says that going with a fairly heavily template team could be a good way to have continuous overall rank improvements. He's a bit like me. He's only had 2 red arrows for largely for this part of the season. But unfortunately, he's only moved up 100k to 41k. That's still pretty good, but I see what he means. If he was doing well, why didn't he move up a bit further? And that was that's something to take forward, that you perhaps have a template team, but you've got to mix it up with 1 or 2. And going back to that, what I was saying about Tom Freeman with his idea of a 4th midfielder, it could be anyone in your team, but just be a bit different with maybe 1 or 2 players, but don't go all to town on it. FPL Militant echoes what we were saying about 352. Dark Side of the Loon says jump on purple patch as soon as possible. This is what Karam was alluding to there. Zen Arcade, I've picked him out because it's one of my favourite Husker Du albums, but Zen Arcade says the only thing I will take away from the season is not to panic if I have a poor start, and to make sure I don't shoot myself in the foot by making decisions which I know to be stupid. For example, selling Kane based on one poor match. That's what we're talking about. Kane didn't start game week 1 well. Game week 2 onwards, absolutely amazing. Runaway says biggest lesson learned from me, I will completely ignore the bench boost chip this year. So I would say if you can use it in a double game week, do it, but don't. I kept saying I hated the chip because you'll make decisions about the rest of your team all based on this 1 week where you can get, as I showed, around 15 to 16 points. That's what you're looking at. 16 points. That's not much at all. So it's not a great chip, really. And finally, Granville. Remember him? So he was on the Scoutcast when it started. Game week 1. Granville. It's a fitting end, I think. Granville says, I've learned that there's no point in planning to play the game differently from year to year, because I never do, he says. I just accept that as long as you keep to a rough set of guidelines, nothing else is in your power, and the rest of it is just down to luck. That should see you rise to around the top 20k every year, give or take a few thousand. So there we go.
I love that that's like contrary to most of the things I've said during this as well. So do ignore me and listen to Granville. Fair enough.
And that's why ever since Granville stopped doing the Scoutcast, because he was busy with other things, everyone in the chat and on Twitter says bring Granville back, because he says things like that, and that's what people want to hear.
He did quite well this year, didn't he? I know he's above me.
Yeah, well, as he says, he's just nothing else is in his power, and he said I think he got definitely in the top 20k easily. I think.
Yeah, fair play.
Well done. There, he's right.
Joe, I was just looking. One of the questions we had there, just about players for next season, whatever. I was just very quickly looking at like some. I won't go into detail on this, and you can make your own mind up on them. But some targets I'd have in mind are Sanchez, Brighton goalkeeper, Luke Ayling, Trent and/or Robbo,
Sorry, Brighton
Havertz
and
Werner.
Spain goalkeeper is in the national
Very
side.
nice, very nice. Havertz and Werner covered them plenty. Man City, there's going to be some decisions to make there. That's KDB, a striker, covered that a little bit. Their defense maybe. Promoted striker, we mentioned Tony there. I think that's a very good shout if he comes up. And then the Leeds midfield. I'm sure this is something we'll cover in pre-season, but we are looking for a left back and a central midfielder. If our midfield changes, it could change the options. And as we saw this year, I think it could be very profitable. So something to keep an eye on.
Okay, that's something to look out for. Definitely look, follow you on Twitter, but also for the Leeds info, but also have a look at the articles on Fantasy Football Scout. I'm sure David and Neil will be all over those. Before we go, I want to remind people about the members area. Obviously, lots of Opta data that we've had there, so do have a look on site for more details there. Also, thank you everyone for watching and listening for the season, and all your kind comments on social media. I do read them all. It's been lovely to read, and Seb and I will be back next season. You'll be pleased. So we've been rehired and we're going to be joined by a new regular host. But more on that anon. But in the meantime, Seb, thanks for a great season. It's been one of my favourites, as I said, weirdly.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, mate, thank you so much for having me. I mean, you do a beautiful job every week on this.
It's been good. So
thank you so much for... No, after you, please.
No, I was going to say, it's going to be good that we're back next season. So more of the
same. I know. I've run out of good things to say. Leeds are boring now. We've spoken about them for a year, so I'll be useless. But no, thank you to yourself. Thank you for Scout for letting me talk about nonsense for an hour or two a week. And thank you so much for everyone who watches and listens. Like, we'd probably still do it if you weren't here, but no one would actually let us do it. No so thank you so much for making it what it is, sending in the questions and listening and all that nonsense.
So for the final time, 2020-21 on the Scoutcast, it's a goodbye from me.
And it's a goodbye from me.
Goodbye all.